There's a warmth in me right now that has nothing to do with the fire. I'm sitting in a snow cave I dug myself 2 hours before dark, and the little candle stub I've got burning in here has lifted the air enough that I stripped my outer layer off. Outside, the wind is doing that thing where it stops sounding like wind and starts sounding like something alive, something with a grudge. The thermometer I keep clipped to my pack read 14 below when the sun went down, and it's dropping still. And I am comfortable. That word ought to bother you, because by every rule of common sense, a man alone in a hole in the snow at 14 below with nothing but a candle should be dying. And instead, I'm loose and easy and half thinking about a nap. That's the thing I want to sit you down and talk about tonight. Because the reason I'm warm in here is the exact same reason more men have frozen to death than you'd ever guess. And it's going to sound backward when I say it. Here it is. The fire. The big, roaring, beautiful fire that everybody pictures when they imagine surviving a cold night. The thing every movie shows you and every instinct in your body screams for. That fire has put more good men in the ground than the cold itself ever managed on its own. I know exactly how that lands. It sounds like nonsense. It sounds like I've spent one too many nights out here talking to myself. So stay with me, because once you understand it, you will never look at a campfire the same way again. And more than that, you'll understand something about heat and cold and the human body that could carry you through a night that would otherwise kill you. Let me tell you who I am first, so you know I'm not guessing. My name's Bram, and I've spent more winters out in cold country than I've spent warm in a house. And I mean real cold, the kind that comes down out of the north and settles into a valley and doesn't lift for weeks. I've run trap lines. I've been caught out when I shouldn't have been, when a day trip turned into a night I hadn't packed for. And I lived through it because men older and harder than me hammered a set of rules into my skull before they ever let me go out alone. They didn't learn those rules from books. They learned them the way this knowledge always gets learned, which is by finding the men who got it wrong, frozen stiff and curled up next to the gray ashes of a fire that had gone out hours before. That last part matters. Hold on to it. Next to a fire. A man dead of the cold, with the makings of a fire, scattered right there beside him. That's the picture I want you to keep in the back of your mind. Because it's the whole riddle of tonight, and I'm not going to explain it yet. How a warm man freezes. Say it over to yourself. How a man with heat at his fingertips, a man who did the one thing everybody tells you to do, ends up just as dead as the man who did nothing at all. It doesn't make sense on the first hearing. It's going to make terrible, perfect sense by the time I'm done. So carry it with you like a coal in your pocket, and we'll come back to it when you're ready. Before any of that lands, you have to understand the thing that makes the cold so different from every other danger you'll ever face out here. The cold doesn't hunt you. A bear hunts you. A bad river hunts you. They come at you fast and loud, and your body knows to be afraid. The cold does the opposite. The cold is patient, and it is quiet, and it works on you so slow and so gentle that by the time you understand you're in real trouble, the part of you that makes decisions has already started shutting down. That's the first thing the old hands wanted me to know. The cold doesn't kill you with pain, it kills you with comfort. It kills you by making you feel just fine right up until the end. And a man who feels fine does not fight for his life. He sits down. He rests his eyes. He decides the shivering was worse than this warm, heavy stillness, and he lets it take him. Now here's where the fire comes in. And here's where I need you leaning close. The reason a lost man builds a big fire is not really to survive. It's to feel better. And those are not the same thing. though every instinct you own insists they are. When you're cold and scared and alone in the dark, a big bright fire is the most comforting thing in the world. It pushes back the dark. It makes noise and light, and it feels like company. It feels like safety. And a man will pour every scrap of his energy into building and feeding that fire because it answers the fear in his chest, not the danger to his body. And that gap, that little gap between what calms your mind and what actually keeps you alive, that gap is where men die. Let me show you exactly how it works, because the trap is more clever than you'd think. Picture the lost man. He's cold, so he builds his fire, and he builds it big because bigger feels safer. He kneels down in the snow in front of it, and he holds his hands out, and the front of him goes warm. Beautiful. His face is warm, his chest is warm, and he feels the relief of it flooding through him. But turn him around in your mind. Look at his back. His back is to the open dark, and it's still 14 below back there. And the heat off that fire isn't reaching it at all. So now he's got a man cooking on one side and freezing on the other. And here's the cruel part. The warm front is lying to his brain. His face feels good, so his mind relaxes. So he stops paying attention to the cold eating into his spine and his kidneys and the backs of his legs. The fire is comforting the exact part of him that reports back to his brain, and it's leaving the rest of him to die. It gets worse. Sit with this next part, because this is the piece almost nobody understands. That big fire is melting the snow. It's throwing so much heat down onto the ground that the snow underneath and around it turns to slush, and then to water. And now the man is kneeling in wet. And wet, out here, in this cold, is a death sentence dressed up as nothing at all. Water pulls heat out of a body more than 20 times faster than dry air does. So this man, warming his hands at his beautiful fire, is soaking the one thing that was insulating him: his own clothes, his own boots, the snow he's sitting on. And every drop of that melt is a hole punched straight through his defenses. He built the fire to save himself, and the fire is drowning his warmth into the ground. And there's a third thing, and this one is the quietest killer of them all. That big fire eats fuel. It eats it fast. A roaring fire in deep cold will burn through an armload of wood in the time it takes you to catch your breath. So the man is up and moving and gathering, breaking branches, dragging deadfall, sweating with the work of it. And now I've said the word. Sweating. Out here, sweat is not relief. Sweat is poison. Because the moment you stop moving, that sweat goes cold against your skin, and it freezes, and it pulls the heat out of you from the inside of your own clothes, where no fire can ever reach. So the very labor of feeding the monster fire is soaking the man in a wet that will turn on him the instant he sits down to enjoy the flames he worked so hard to build. Now here's where the old ones separated themselves from the dead men, and I want you to sit with who knew this and who didn't, because it tells you everything. The native peoples of the far north, the ones who lived 1,000 winters in the coldest country a human being has ever managed to survive in, they did not build big fires. They couldn't. In a lot of that country, there's barely any wood to burn at all. So they learned a different thing entirely, a thing the newcomers took 2 centuries and a great many frozen corpses to even begin to understand. They learned that you do not fight the cold with heat. You fight the cold by keeping the heat you've already got. Their whole way of living, the snow houses, the layered furs, the small contained flame of an oil lamp instead of a bonfire, all of it was built around one idea. Your body is the fire. Your body is throwing off heat every second you're alive. Enough heat to keep you warm through the worst night imaginable. And the only job that actually matters is not letting that heat escape. The men who died were the ones who had it backward. The trappers and the prospectors and the lost travelers who came from warmer places, they thought heat came from outside. They thought you added warmth the way you'd add a log. So when the cold came, they went looking for a source. And they found the fire, and they poured themselves into it, and they died in front of it. Meanwhile, the people who'd been here all along were curled up warm in a hole in the snow, with a flame no bigger than your hand, laughing at the wind. That's the whole difference. One group thought the answer was to make more heat. The other group knew the answer was to lose less. And that single flip in thinking is the line between the man who walks out in the morning and the man they find in the spring. So keep that riddle warm in your pocket, the warm man who freezes, because we are getting closer to it now. And keep this next question ready too, because it's the one everything turns on. If the big fire is the trap, then what's the fix? What did the old hands do instead? I'm going to hand it to you in layers, the same slow way it was handed to me, because if I dump the whole of it on you at once, you'll nod along and forget it by morning. And this is the kind of thing you cannot afford to forget. So we build it up piece by piece, and by the time we're through, you'll have something small enough to carry and strong enough to save your life. But first I need you to really understand, down in your bones, that the enemy was never the cold outside you. The enemy is the heat leaking out of you. And the fire you build to fight the cold is very often the hole you're losing that heat through. Hold that. We're going into the fix now. Here's the fix, and I want to say it plain before I break it apart, because the whole of it is worth more than any single piece. The thing that saves you is not the fire. It's the shelter you build before the fire. And specifically, it's the thing everybody skips. The thing that feels like a waste of daylight when you're cold and scared and want the comfort of flames right now. It's the ground. It's what you put between your body and the frozen earth. That's the part men throw away. That's the part that kills them. And it costs nothing but the willingness to spend your first hour of daylight doing the boring thing instead of the comforting thing. Let me give you the layers now, the way they were given to me. The first layer turns your whole head around, and it's this. You do not build heat. You trap it. Everything you do out here, from the first minute you understand you're spending the night, should be aimed at holding the warmth your own body is already making, not at manufacturing new warmth from outside. This reverses everything your fear is telling you. Your fear wants a fire. Your body wants a barrier. So the very first thing you do before you gather one stick of firewood is you build something to keep your own heat close. A wall of snow at your back. A roof of branches over your head. A hollow just big enough to hold your body and no bigger. Because a big space is a big space to heat, and a small space your own breath and body will warm all on their own. Small is warm, big is cold. Get that backward, and nothing else you do will matter. The second layer is the part modern people throw away without a thought, and it's the ground underneath you. Listen close. You lose more heat lying on frozen ground than you lose to all the wind and all the air combined. The earth in deep cold is a thief that never sleeps, and it will pull the warmth straight out of your back and down into itself all night long, and no fire on this earth reaches under you to stop it. So before anything, you build a bed. You pile up spruce boughs, dead grass, bark, pine needles, your pack, anything at all. And you get a thick, springy layer between your body and the ground, thick enough that when you lie down and it packs flat, there's still a hand's width of it left. The old hands would spend an hour on the bed alone and think it well spent, while the doomed man wouldn't spend a minute on it because it didn't feel like doing anything. He wanted the fire. He got the fire. He lay down on the bare, frozen ground next to it, and the ground drank him dry from underneath while his face stayed warm. The bed is the thing nobody makes and everybody needs. The third layer feels like cheating once you learn it, and it's about the fire. Because I'm not telling you to have no fire at all. I'm telling you to build the right one. You build a small fire, hand-sized, and you build a wall behind it, a reflector, a stack of green logs, or a bank of packed snow, or a slab of rock, set on the far side of the flame so that all that heat, instead of pouring off uselessly into the dark, bounces back toward you. And then you sit between the fire and your snow wall, so the heat comes at you from the front and reflects off the wall behind you. And suddenly, your little hand-sized fire is warming you from two directions and heating the small pocket of air you've trapped, and it does the work of a bonfire 10 times its size while burning a tenth of the wood. That's the trick that feels like magic. You stop trying to heat the whole outdoors, and you heat one small, human-sized pocket, and you let the walls do half the work for free. The fourth layer is the one that sounds like madness, and it's this. When the cold is at its worst, you build a smaller fire, not a bigger one. I'll say it again, because everything in you fights it. The colder it gets, the smaller and more contained your fire should be. Because a big fire means big work and big sweat and big fuel gathering and big heat loss around the open sides of it. And every one of those things is a leak. A small fire in a small shelter, with a bed beneath you and a wall behind you, will keep you alive through a night that a roaring bonfire, out in the open with nothing between you and the ground, would let you die in. The men who lived learned to want less fire, not more. And it is the single most counterintuitive thing I know about the cold, and it is dead true. Now come back with me to the riddle, the warm man who freezes. Here's the whole answer laid out plain, and once you see it, the rest locks into place. The warm man freezes because his warmth was a lie told by his skin. His face was warm and his hands were warm, so his brain, which listens to his skin, decided everything was fine. But heat was pouring off his back into the dark and out of his body into the frozen ground beneath him and evaporating out of his sweat-soaked clothes, faster than the fire could ever put it back. His core, the deep warmth around his heart and his lungs, the only warmth that actually keeps a man alive, was cooling the entire time his face was cooking. And because his skin kept telling his brain a comfortable story, he never fought it. He never got up and fixed the real problem. He just fed the fire and warmed his hands and felt fine. And feeling fine, he let the cold walk right past his comfortable skin and into the deep of him where it stops a heart. That is how a warm man freezes. Comfortable, unafraid, warming himself right up until the end. His fire didn't fail him. His fire betrayed him by comforting him instead of saving him and letting him mistake the one for the other. And here's the cruelest turn of it, the part that makes this a true mountain story and not just a lesson. The colder the night, the bigger the fire a scared man wants to build. And the bigger the fire, the faster all the ways it kills you speed up. The melt runs faster, the sweat pours harder, the fuel burns quicker. So the very night that most tempts you into the trap, the deep killing cold, is the night the trap snaps hardest. When you need to be smallest and stillest and most careful, that's exactly when your fear is screaming loudest for the big roaring blaze. The cold sets its own bait, and the bait is your own instinct. You're probably wondering why nobody ever told you this, why it isn't common knowledge. And the answer's quiet, and it has nothing to do with anybody lying to you. It's that we stopped needing it. The day the furnace came on in the house, the day heat became a thing you buy by turning a dial, the whole hard-won knowledge of how a body actually holds its warmth just quietly slipped away. Because nobody keeps a rule alive that they'll never have to use. And then something worse happened. And this is the part that ought to make you sit up. The modern world took the truth and sold you its opposite. Everything they sell you now is about adding heat from outside. Hand warmers, big propane heaters, heated jackets with batteries in them. Bigger, hotter, more. The whole marketing of staying warm is built on the idea that warmth is a thing you purchase and apply from the outside, which is the exact backward thinking that killed those trappers. There's no product to sell in telling a man that his own body is the furnace, and all he needs is to stop the leaks. There's a fortune in selling him one more thing that glows and burns and runs out of fuel right when he needs it most. So they hand him, smiling, the same lie the cold's been telling forever, that the answer is more heat from outside, when the answer was always less heat lost from within. Let me be straight with you now, the way I'd want a man to be straight with me. This probably won't happen to you. You're not likely to freeze to death this winter, not with a furnace humming and a roof over you and a phone in your pocket. To actually die of this, you'd have to be caught out, a day trip gone long, a truck broke down on an empty road, a hunt that pushed too far from camp. That's the man this comes for. But I'll tell you what I told you about the warm man. Every single person the cold ever took thought, right up until the end, that they were doing fine. That's the whole nature of it. The comfort is the danger. So you don't get to feel safe just because you feel warm. That's the one lesson I'd carry out of here ahead of every trick I've given you. And I won't skip the hard proof, because this one's written down where anybody can check it. The medical people have a name for the strangest part of it, the thing where a freezing man tears his own clothes off in the last stage before the end. They call it paradoxical undressing, and it's documented in case after case. Men found dead in the snow with their coats and shirts stripped away and folded beside them as if they'd meant to go swimming. It happens because when the body's core cools far enough, the blood vessels that had clamped shut to hold heat in suddenly fling open all at once, and a great rush of the last warm blood floods to the skin. And for one final terrible moment, the freezing man feels burning hot. So he undresses. And that's the cold's last lie, saved for the very end. The same lie it told the whole way down, whispering warm. You're warm. You're fine. Right up until it isn't lying anymore, and there's nothing left of him to save. When your own body will strip you naked in the snow because it feels too hot, you understand at last that comfort out here was never, ever proof of safety. So here's how you carry all of this, not as fear, but as a plain way of doing things. The whole system, the way the old hands lived it. The moment you know you're out for the night, you spend your first and best hour not on fire, but on shelter. And the heart of that shelter is the bed beneath you, thick and dry, between your body and the ground that wants to drink you. You build small, a space just big enough for you, walls close at your back, a roof low overhead, so your own body heats the pocket you're in. You build your fire small, and you build it a wall, a reflector to bounce the heat back at you, so a little flame does the work of a big one. You never let yourself sweat. You strip a layer before you work, and you put it back before you cool. And above all, you never, ever trust the warmth of your own skin to tell you the truth about the cold in your core. None of it costs a thing. The spruce boughs are free. The snow wall is free. The knowing to build small instead of big costs nothing but the humility to do the boring thing, while your fear begs for the comfortable one. Maybe that's the real lesson, the one bigger than fire and bigger than snow. Those men didn't die because the cold was cruel. The cold was only ever just the cold. They died because they trusted comfort. They trusted the warm feeling on their skin. They trusted the bright fire pushing back the dark. They trusted the thing that felt like safety instead of the thing that was safety. And the wilderness never takes the careful man half as fast as it takes the comfortable one. The old hands feared their own comfort more than they feared the cold itself, because they knew comfort was the mask the cold wore when it came to take you. That's the thing I'd hand you ahead of any trick I know. So there's the whole of it. Small enough to carry and free as the snow it's written in. Trap your heat. Don't make it. Build your bed before your fire. Build small and build a wall to throw the heat back. Keep the fire little and keep yourself dry. And never trust warm skin to speak for a cold heart. Do that much, and the coldest night this country can throw at you will break against your shelter and blow on past. And you'll walk out into the gray morning, stiff and hungry and alive. The people who settled this hard country with their 2 hands and their 2 feet knew these things by heart, and we're only now beginning to remember them. And a piece of that knowing nearly went into the frozen ground with the last of them. I won't stand by and watch it go. So tell me down in the comments, if you and your family got caught out tonight, an hour before dark, in the cold, what's the first thing you'd do? And be honest, is it build a fire? Because I want to know how deep the instinct runs in you, so I know how hard we've got to work to turn it around. Next time, I'm going to hand you another one that turns everything you've been told on its head. An old rule about the cold that runs dead against every bit of common sense you've got. The one where the more still and quiet and peaceful you feel out in that snow, the closer death has already crept. And I'll show you why the old hands feared calm more than they feared shivering, and what they made themselves do about it. Until then, take care of your fire, and keep it small, because the heat that saves you was always your own.